This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin and decentralized defense, though I also could have called this video Them Crazy Gun-Toting Americans. This is a follow-up to a video that I made for YouTube members only a couple days ago. It's called Bitcoin Time to Leave the US, and I talked about the trade-offs that come with leaving the US because we have very strong constitutional protections here, but on the other hand, the country is definitely taking a turn for the worse. So if you're interested in US exit taxes and this whole debate where to live in the world as a Bitcoiner and be safe, you can get access to this video just by clicking the join button. I'll put a link in the description notes below as well as in the pinned comment. And this video today is a response to Motoric5188's comment on this video right here, Bitcoin Time to Leave the US. I'm surprised to see your advocating view on the Second Amendment. Short anecdote happened last year. Company I work in hosted young engineer lady from our USA small sister company. I'm from the EU. Her boyfriend came along as well. We went for drinks one evening, and I'll never forget her boyfriend's answer to the question, what do they experience as the biggest difference compared to the US? And he replied, I feel like I'm naked. I was confused by what he meant, and then he proceeded to say, because I don't carry, in other words, carry a concealed gun, if at least I'd have some knife by me. They were both afraid to walk in our capital city when it got dark. We locals had to persuade them that nothing is going to happen to them. If you walk at night through our city, our crime rate over here is really low. I recommend anyone from the States to come to the EU and try this for themselves. You'll be surprised how unburdened we are with the guns and the violence guns brings over here, but maybe leave out major cities from France, UK, and Germany, so those would be the exceptions. Humans already are easily polarized into two camps by the ruling elites. Now give those people guns and what could escalate? Of course, only one side does have guns. I have strong belief that guns do not solve anything. Do we really learn nothing from the history? Guns have absolutely no place in humanity's future. Their purpose is to kill, making the gun producer wallet fat. Beyond sickening, the future is in peaceful, united, fair world, which Bitcoin helps to achieve. This is a really common viewpoint that I've been hearing from European friends and others for decades. So today I want to examine this gun control debate as part of the larger question of centralization versus decentralization. Now, decentralization, as we know on this channel, is usually much better for individual freedom and also for risk control. So, for example, if all of your electricity comes from a single source and that single source can be captured or blown up, this is the risks of single points of failure. If your electricity comes from multiple sources, of course, it's more robust against attacks. Now, Bitcoin is a great example of decentralization, decentralized money that no single group can control. If your money is centralized, by contrast, it will be used to enrich insiders through money printing and other forms of control. This is what we call a Cantillon effect or Cantillon effect. Those closest to the money printer benefit the most because they can spend the newly printed money before inflation hits the economy, inflation that's caused by that newly printed money, while those further away from the money printer get hurt by the ensuing inflation. With centralized money, there's also this problem of being debanked or deplatformed if the government doesn't like your political views. We saw this happen in Canada, of course, in 2022 with the trucker protest where the banks were being frozen. The truckers' bank accounts were being frozen. Decentralization is also very important for food production and distribution. The prevalence of home gardens and chickens and cows, decentralized food production in Russia and elsewhere is a direct result of having lived through the food shortages that came with Soviet rule, and you can find examples like this all over the world. The risks that come with food centralization, capture and control, for example, the government could decide how many eggs or how much beef you can buy every month, and then there's also the problems of disasters where if you have all your animals or all your food production in one place, when you get a problem like bird flu, for example, whether it was real or not, they had to kill here 4.2 million chickens. So decentralized food production fixes this, backyard chickens, home gardens, etc. Now let's think about decentralized defense. We've already talked about decentralized money and decentralized food, and hopefully those examples made a lot of sense. And now we're going to use the same principle entering the more controversial area of defense. There's no country on earth where the government and the criminals, lots of overlap there in many places, including the US, there's no country on earth where the government and the criminals do not have guns. So when you're talking about gun control, you're really talking about taking guns away from everyday citizens who haven't committed a crime. For example, I've never heard a Democrat talk about taking guns away from IRS agents. If you commit a crime in the US, you go to a place, jail, where you cannot use your gun anymore. And I think that's a great way to stop criminals from using guns. Likewise, if you run someone over with your car, you go to jail. And that's because the problem was you. The problem was not the car that you used to run someone over. This is a much more fair solution than banning cars for law-abiding citizens. So when someone like the commenter to that video said, guns have absolutely no place in humanity's future, I have to assume that they're expecting the criminals and the terrorists and the government employees, the police, the soldiers, the intelligence agencies people to turn in their guns as well. And that seems rather naive to me. History is full of examples of people being disarmed right before they were severely abused. For example, the English did it to the Scots and the Irish at various points in time. There's a couple laws here where the English restricted ownership of weapons and land by Irish Catholics, and a similar example disarming the Scots in 1716 and 1746. I'll link to this thread on gun control that goes through many, many examples. For example, the gun control that the Bolsheviks did in the Soviet Union in order to establish quote-unquote equality among all people. And then, of course, there were massacres. Something similar happened in Turkey with the Armenians and the Armenian genocide between 1915 and 1917. And there are many examples here, which I will link to in the description notes below. We have a very recent example with Venezuela banning private gun ownership in 2012, and then just a few years later beginning to kill people left and right. And of course, they're defenseless at this point. And then, of course, we have the Uyghurs and other groups in China who are obviously unarmed and suffering terribly as a result. When the commenter, or you hear people say guns cannot protect you from the government, where in the history books did that ever happen successfully? I suggest the person who asks this question tries Googling something like American Revolutionary War. If you ban guns, the bad guys will still use guns or other weapons. So maybe you should ban really big sticks too, or kitchen knives and silverware, as I know they've done in the UK to a certain extent. Here's an example from Eric Wall of a middle-aged Swedish couple who were tied up in their home and robbed by 4 masked men. They were physically abused and threatened with their own kitchen knives. They were tied up for hours, and one had to be escorted to the hospital via helicopter. The purpose of the assault was to steal the couple's Bitcoin. The real problem here is that Swedish families are allowed to own kitchen knives. Is this really necessary? Don't Swedes have strong teeth that they can use instead? Maybe if we ban meat, people won't need knives anymore. They can just cook their vegetables really soft and gum them. Maybe we should pull out everyone's teeth because someone somewhere bit someone once. So you can see the slippery slope that comes with this sort of thing. We have a recent example as well from early September. UK authorities seize covert $144,000 of Bitcoin stolen in a Machete home invasion in Scotland. Now, of course, this is what happens when people can't defend their own homes from the criminals, and increasingly in the UK, the government seems less and less happy to or willing to protect normal, everyday people. I'll spare you the details here of what would happen to a home invader who tried to enter my house with a machete. I'll also link here as well to Jameson Lopp's list of physical attacks on people who own Bitcoin, number of examples from all over the world and from Europe as well, from the EU as well, which I'll link to in the description notes below. What's happening here is part of a larger context where governments around the world are trying to erase all cultural memories of self-sovereignty. The government says, we'll tell you what's safe to eat. Bill Gates will grow it for you. We'll sell it to you only when we want to. You'll own nothing and be happy. There are many versions of this. And the thing about the US, the thing about America, is it's one of the few exceptions that still manages to preserve at least the cultural memory of self-sovereign individuals, especially men, which used to be present all over the world. Men who are not eunuchs or government bootlickers, men who protect their families from home invaders. Imagine doing something like that, how radical and right-wing that is. And men who protect their families from government thugs too, if necessary. Of course, the government can easily kill one armed man and his family, but it's much more difficult to kill 80 million of us. And I love this tweet from Naval. Ultimately, whether visible or not, the people with the guns are always in charge. America, and by extension the West, remains free because of 80 million armed and intransigent Americans. I love that word, intransigent. Happy 4th of July. And someone responded to him, that used to be true before thermonuclear bombs, nuclear weapons were a thing, but whatever. And my response to him was, governments don't use nukes to put you in a camp or a gulag. They use guns, and armed populations do not end up in gulags. I love this quote especially because Naval was born in New Delhi, India. So here's a great example of someone who's immigrated to the U.S. and really gets the Constitution and understands the Second Amendment better than many, many Americans do. So we have decentralized money, decentralized food, decentralized defense, and I think all of these are extremely important. There's a fork in the road of human culture and politics. You can choose to be a slave, or you can choose to be a self-sovereign human being. Choose wisely, though, because once you've given up your freedom, there's never a way to get it back, or it may take decades or even centuries to get it back. And your children and your children's children won't even understand what the word freedom means. Like so many people who live in the UK and the EU, and I don't mean to pick on those parts of the world because this is a problem in the US as well. So many people who live in the US don't understand what freedom means anymore and are looking to dismantle the very Constitution that protects them. These are people whose own ancestors would not recognize them. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. Let me know your questions and comments in the comments section below. And if you do want to get access to that members only video, you can click the join button, which is right here at the top of the video once you subscribe. And you can also click on the linked comment, the link in the pinned comment, which I'll put below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.